So coming back to this, Arnab, do you want to introduce yourself, your background, and your current role at Google?
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you so much, Zack, for having me here. And it's so incredible to be with this audience. And what was amazing for me today, hearing in the morning all the different sessions, number of times AI was used, and coming from Google, this was music to my ears, right? No wonder our stock is kind of getting close to 400 now, right? So let's push some more and get it past 400. But I think broadly, it is a point in time in our industry in terms of how things are really transforming, right? So, and I think given how the technology is kind of moving very, very rapidly, and what I heard today from how Propel is actually looking at overall from a technology perspective and the broader roadmap, I think that's where industry is actually headed, right? So with that quick introduction about myself, so I lead the cloud consulting team within Google. The cloud consulting team essentially is the team which is the last mile team. So all the amazing tech that Google Cloud and Google comes out with. So my team are the leaders within our largest strategic accounts, very focused on driving AI transformation. So when we say AI transformation, essentially it means different things to different people, right? So my team is very, very focused on making sure that all the cool LLMs and all the cool technologies and models that's coming in, it kind of has the legs to deliver the business outcome for our customers. So that's what my team is actually focused on. A little bit of my background. So prior to joining Google, I was with AWS, where I worked with Zack very closely. Prior to that, I did consulting. And prior to that, I started my career in manufacturing. So a lot of the things that I was hearing, that's where I started my career in terms of how much the manufacturing landscape itself has evolved. And there's still so much to do, right? So it's amazing times. So great to be here, Zack.
Thank you. So you and I have been chatting about this for a while. Can you talk about why you think the pharma industry is further ahead in AI transformer relative to MedTech, and what can they do today, like to get on par, right?
Yeah, no, I think great question. So as I was looking at it, right, and now since last 8-9 months, what I've been seeing very, very closely in terms of how industry itself has been evolving, right? So there were a lot of the word, right? The pilot purgatory was very much in use. People were doing a lot of pilots and stuff like that. But I think in the last 3-4 months, I see two clear, distinct camps kind of emerging, right? People who are really making big bets on AI and go leaning in full time. And there are still some organizations or some businesses who are still trying to evolve, trying to figure out what is the sweet spot for them. So coming back, right, to specifically answer the question, I think I would answer it in two parts, right? One is the science part and second is the business part. Now, if you look at it from a science part, how pharma or biotech or for that matter process industry is, right? You have to look at what is the unit of innovation. Mm-hmm. So the unit of innovation for a pharma is a molecule, right? Which is essentially how a molecule interacts with a protein and how it binds. That's how you kind of get into what disease areas that you are actually bringing in. When we look at MedTech is more of a unit of innovation is components, right? When you are looking at hundreds of components need to work together in close conjunction to kind of deliver the outcome, right? So pharma is more discoverability, MedTech is more orchestration. Now, given that, right, and given how coming to the second part of it, right, which is the business side of things. So from business side of things, again, right, how the product evolution happens is a little bit different in pharma. It takes like 8 to 10 years for a product to get fully developed from a drug perspective, whereas in MedTech, it's like 3 to 4 years or 5 years, right? So there are these different variances that are there in terms of how industry is kind of looking at it. So that's why pharma kind of moved very fast, and they started with the R&D, right? So a lot of the things that, especially coming from Google and from DeepMind, right, with our Alpha Genome, with a lot of the products that came out from DeepMind was very focused on the R&D and discovery side. So that is where pharma saw a lot of very high adoption in terms of AI could actually deliver the results for them. And now slowly we are seeing it. They are getting into a lot of different areas, manufacturing, tech transfer, such an important area. We are working with a very large pharmaceutical major in terms of expediting their tech transfer processes and getting into regulatory and stuff like that. So I think coming back to answer the second part of your question, right, which is basically, I think from MedTech to kind of lean on in, is to pick up some of the areas on regulatory, submission. Those are like sweet spots, very common with the challenges that the pharma industry that they have. And those are the areas I would probably strongly recommend. And I'm seeing there are a lot of action already happening, but those are the areas that I would kind of pick on.
Great, thank you. Let's switch gears and talk about our favorite subject, FDA and oversight, right? So I personally have looked at the data last 2 years, recalls and warning letters. They've been up significantly, right? We talked about earlier today about AI, but broadly, when you look at design to release process with QMS, how important is to have a unified platform to not just comply, but also when you start using agentic AI, why is it beneficial?
Yeah, look, I heard a lot about FDA since morning, right? So one of the things, so as Google, we are working very, very closely with FDA. And in fact, I think a week back, there was a public announcement that came in. So FDA has created a platform called as ELSA, which is where we are they are building an agent and an AI ecosystem as well, working with agents and stuff like that. So they are also upskilling themselves, right, pretty fast. And you would see some of that results coming in as they start interacting more with the industry, right? So that's a process that's kind of getting in. But coming back again, right, specifically in terms of, to your point, right, on the warning letters, I think FDA is looking at more holistically, right? They're just not looking at what product is doing. They're looking at the overall end-to-end traceability in terms of how things are actually coming in. And that is where I think it is getting super important to kind of bring in, look at your overall data strategy in terms of where does your data resides. Like, for example, if you have a complaint that comes in, right, and then you're trying to claw back, right, in terms of where that complaint came in. So complaint management is a separate platform itself. Then you're trying to see in terms of your design history files, where exactly it's residing, your non-conformances and CAPA. So it's kind of a very distributed platform that it exists right now. So if an AI system has to work, right, it has to get a broader context, right? And the broader context can only come in when you're able to piece things together, right? So if any individual and a human is also working at it, they can't come to a decision looking at one part of the data, right? So the AI system also needs a wider access to the data for it to build that context, help to create those evaluation matrices and come up with some of the conclusions, which is something the humans can take and kind of go in from there. So that is where I think that data is a super important piece here, and I think I heard in the morning in terms of how Propel One is kind of looking at it. That is the right way and right strategy in terms of looking at not only your QMS data, your product engineering data, and kind of look at holistically and build a platform right around that and kind of drive outcomes from there.
For sure, and I think I was referring this earlier as well. I think I've been around the block like some of you have, and the PLM QMS kind of grew up separately, focusing on R&D and QMS. And with all this agentic AI, as I said earlier, bolt-on never works, right? You have to really treat AI from a regulatory perspective. And Caroline, I'm going to talk about compliance for a second, but it has to be treated the same way as you have done in the past, traceability and all that. So switching gears, you saw MCP this morning, right? People have described this as like a USB port for integration, but can you talk about like what you're seeing in MCP and why is it important for not just regulated industry, but broader manufacturing to really quickly get on the bandwagon because it's coming pretty fast?
It is. And I think one of the things which I think is happening right in the industry is that last year, the conversation was all around models, right? I mean, you had ChatGPT, you had Claude, you had Gemini, right? But this year, since last 4 or 5 months, what I'm seeing, that conversation has actually shifted, right? People are not talking about models. People are talking about what are the outcomes that we are trying to get to, right? So the distance from a model to an outcome, whether it's an agent, right, or whether it's an AI application that you are actually building in, the gap that we see is which we're calling it as AI harness, right? So you have to build an AI harness because an LLM itself is stateless, right? And it will not have any context. So harness essentially brings in the context to your LLM. Now, if you look at what exactly I mean by harness. So harness is MCP is one of the important component of the harness. And I think Propel One is a great strategy in terms of you're opening it up so that if anyone is building an AI application, people have access to the data, to the application itself, to kind of get the data and context for their applications, right? That is one. Second, you need memory, right? You need to make sure that whatever I have probed my AI application on, it gets the context continuously, right? So it needs the tooling, it needs the sandbox. So essentially, you need kind of a scaffolding around your LLM to kind of get to the outcome that you are actually looking at, right? So that is another concept that's kind of picked up very much. And today morning we had heard about it, right? Is the headless UI. So the UI, the concept of UI itself is also changing significantly, right? And probably in 1 year's time, how we consume application would be fundamentally different, right? And we saw that with the advent of OpenClaw that came in like 3-4 months back, and it took the industry by storm. Why it took the industry by storm is basically someone could actually build that whole application in 1 to 2 months, right? And kind of lay that out, right, for the users to actually use it. So that is where I think the fundamental shift is actually happening. And having those right construct in place as you are looking at, so if you are end user, if you are a MedTech or a manufacturer, right, you would want to fundamentally look at what is your application strategy is going to be next probably 1 year. I'm not saying 2 years, 5 years, because they are so far out, you can't really predict in terms of how technology would be. So for you to get there, right, for example, for your users to get access to the right context, right data, in terms of how you're looking at it, so I think building those strategy becomes super, super important. So having that, again, coming back to my point on building these harnesses are kind of super important. And as part of your enterprise strategy, you need to make sure that you have those pieces in as you're building that up.
Thank you. So just continuing on the thought about AI, but broadly like PLM, QMS, or design to release and quality, where do you see customers are kind of diving deep in terms of really trying to understand where can they really leverage AI to kind of drive more benefits, but things they couldn't do in the past, right?
Yeah, I think there's one significant shift that is happening as well, and there's a lot more that has to happen, is we have to stop thinking AI as a tool, right? I think the broader way where I'm seeing higher adoption with a lot of the customers that we are working in, where they are actually using AI as a partner, right? So one example is, especially in the pharma world, again, taking my pharma example, people are using AI as AI co-scientists. So scientists are actually using in AI as their partner in terms of testing hypotheses, building up models, seeing what exactly it looks like, right? So it's essentially two people kind of working together for the same outcome. Now, if you look at from a MedTech perspective or broadly from a manufacturing perspective, that whole model will move into as a co-scientist to a co-engineer model. So if you are an engineer working either on design or on quality or on product release, you have to think of how I can use these tools as a partner to help drive the outcome that I'm actually performing. Listen, we all are living in a very resource-constrained world. We are all asked to do more with lesser and lesser resources, right? So that is where I think fundamentally using AI as a partner tool becomes so much important to kind of drive the outcome that we are trying to get to.
So it's like creating your own avatar or digital twin of yourself, right?
Something like that. And that world is coming sooner than later, actually.
I know, that's true. In terms of, there's a lot of leaders here, quality and R&D, and they're all kind of thinking about where to start AI. What's your take on, in general, on the R&D side, or on the quality side, what they should be looking for to really even embark on this journey, right?
So I have a very kind of a contrarian point of view, and which I think has resonated quite a lot with a lot of the customers that I have spoken with. start with your most difficult and complex problem that you are actually trying to solve. Because a lot of the times,
think big.
think big, and because a lot of the times we try to start with a smaller thing, which is basically whether it's a conversational AI and stuff like that. No, I would probably start with what is my most complex problem that I'm dealing with, right? So what it does two things. One is, if it succeeds, the outcome is huge, right? That you really move the needle. If it doesn't succeed, the learnings and the lessons that you get out of it are so incredible because you can bring that into tackling some of the smaller challenges or lesser challenges that you're bringing in, which you can actually, again, dovetail back, create a flywheel, so to speak, to kind of attack the bigger problem. Mm-hmm. So my suggestion would be to go after your most complex, right, a hairy problem, which is something has been there for quite some time, and just go after it, right, and see where it lands, actually.
So bringing back a couple of the principles that you and I worked in the past, fail fast, and two-way doors, right? So what are some of the risks there you think you should be looking for? We talked a lot today about investment and cybersecurity and all of. Collectively, when you're thinking about an AI transformation, let's say blueprint for your company, what are some of the key components they should be thinking about, other than the use cases and all that?
I think the biggest component is, and what Caroline was presenting, right, on the different personas, that kind of resonated with me because that, in my mind, is the biggest blocker, right? Your ability to change and an individual's ability to adopt in terms of how these different changes are actually coming in, right? So the change management plays such an important role in terms of how we are actually driving some of these changes, right? So I would put change management as one. Second is, as you are building these AI systems, security is something super important. I'm not sure if you saw that, right? Yesterday, Google announced that there was one security, we call it as a day zero incident, which is where an AI actually created a security incident, which is something was detected. So it was AI generated. When we kind of, you can read it, it's all there in the news, right? When you kind of went through it, right, we kind of found that it was created by AI. Right? So that day is actually coming in very fast. So security is kind of something very important. And the third part is making sure that any AI projects, any AI use case that you are actually looking at, it has a very well-defined success criteria, right? You know what are the outcomes that you're trying to get to. If you are not clear about the outcome, my suggestion is don't do that, right? Till the time you have very good clarity about what outcomes that particular use case will actually deliver. So those are some of the things that I would potentially focus on.
What do you think in terms of the AI adoption in regulatory industry? Now, we saw the first warning letter literally calls out AI, right? What are the things they should be looking for to make sure that they're not afraid of the thing which is coming really fast, but are also doing the way things they're doing that is compliant, quote unquote, from a regulatory perspective? What do you think the adoption can be increased? What are some of the things they should be focused on?
Yeah, I think one of the things which I see which prevents people in regulated industries is compliance, right? I mean, and that is like a common word, right? Oh, we are in a compliant industry, right? Quote unquote. Now you can use compliance in a good way, and you can use compliance as a roadblocker as well.
It's a good way to hide behind something, right?
Right. So a lot of the times that we do that, I think that is why it is super important to understand what are the risks. Right, and identifying, okay, if this is the path that I'm taking, what are the risks that I'm kind of taking with me, right? Focusing on 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and what is my mitigation plan around some of those risks? And the chances are, as you focus on them, you will understand that those are the risks that are pretty managed. And that is what I've seen in last 6 months, working in regulated industries for some of our very big customers, is working proactively with them, and also working with the regulatory teams, right? And helping them, because that is the team which is under most pressure, right? Because they are facing pressure from the regulatory agencies, there are internal pressures that are coming up, making sure that they are lockstep in terms of how we are kind of looking at, and they have the visibility in terms of what the risks are, what the plans are against it, and how we are working towards it. The chances are that you will create a path and kind of get there.
And I think there's a lot of opportunity for not just regulatory industry, but like I talked earlier on, internal audits or PCCP, whatever that may be, there's a lot of opportunities that customers can use to really increase their time to market pretty fast, right?
Absolutely. I think, as I said, the opportunity space is huge, right? And I think picking up an area which is, it could be submission, right? And which is a huge area, because there's so much time that it takes in terms of submitting a particular product, your 510Ks and all that. It takes a whole lot of effort, right? So that's again a tremendous productivity gain can be actually had as we are looking at it. So those are some of the early successes that you could potentially create as you are embarking on your AI journey.
Yeah, when I was looking at the slides that Caroline had, one of the things, two books reminded me of two books. One was Crossing the Chasm. You probably read that. It has a similar thing. But the other one is Innovator's Dilemma. I don't know if you read that book. It's by Ken Christensen at Harvard Business School. And it's a very geek read, right? So if you like data, that's the one I want you to read. But it talks about the steel industry and the storage device, if you remember that. And the S-curve, if you know the S-curve in the product, and how cheaper, faster, better, parallel S-curves always gets created. And some of the big companies, all industries, tend to ignore that. And they get into this Who Moved My Cheese book, if you read that one. They keep going back to the same space. And before you know, customers have jumped to the new one. So just from this is my point of view, is that when you're looking at AI, right, there's a lot of challenges, I get it, there's a lot of regulatory, but it should be an opportunity, because if you're not doing it, somebody else will do it, right? And I'll give you as an example. In my previous life, I had HeartFlow as my customer. I don't know if you know HeartFlow. It's completely AI-built solution, and their whole success was around looking at your heart scan and tell you if you have a serious problem or not. So typically it will take them months, right? Because the doctor will say, go get a procedure done. I want to take a sample and all that. These guys use AI, same scan, and they deliver the same outcome within an hour with 95% efficacy, same as the other one. So now think about that. It's the patient outcome, super important. So if you're serious, they'll send you to hospital. But more importantly, it's around cost, insurance. So I think the opportunity is there, and I think you should think about innovating products that people haven't thought about that, right? My last question, and we can open up for questions if anybody had. How do you use AI in your day-to-day stuff?
Well,
Are you a geek of AI, like always on?
Yeah, I use it all the time. So my question for the audience here, right? How many of you have used Notebook LM? Very few, right? So I strongly encourage.
Oh, he's selling Google, by the way, but okay. I'll let him do that. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, I think Notebook LM is an amazing tool, and I was talking with Ross as well, and I think you are already using it, right?
Eric, yeah.
Eric is already using Notebook LM. It's a fantastic tool. As you are building stuff, it's your own personal LLM, so to speak. In a lot of shape and form, it creates slides, it creates podcasts, it creates videos, it creates summaries. It's an amazing tool, right? So I would strongly encourage all of you to it's free, and using your Gmail ID, you can actually use it. But coming back, I think AI is coming into everything, right? In terms of how we are actually using it. So I use Gemini quite a lot for all my meeting notes. So I've built some low-code, no-code agents in Gemini Enterprise to help me in my meeting notes, for my meeting preparations, whether it's meeting with customers or internal meetings, creating executive summaries together, creating slides together, because slides are, again, sorry for selling Google, but Google Slides are amazing, right? In terms of creating.
Yeah, Microsoft is in trouble, yeah.
Creating some of those things, right? So I think there is a lot of productivity hacks that exist, but I think that the opportunities, again, are tremendous and very excited. Yeah.
What I will say, just my, if I get on a Claude, it's like my Instagram, right? Like I never can get off it. But recently I looked at last 3 years of recall, so 483s, warning letters, and all that in the US. Amazing outcome. Was produced a 9-page document, data-driven. And if you geek about it, I can share with you. It's very FDA and industry. Number one was CAPA-related recalls. And my personal thing was to connect the actual root cause from FDA to a PLM or a QMS process, independent of a vendor. And he did that, right? It's just amazing. And my next question was, okay, so how will Propel solve it? And he came back, and it's phenomenal in terms of, to your point, preparing for, but also learning, right? So I'll encourage you to look at internal audit and PCCP, how AI can fix that, right? With that, if there's any other questions, no, we're done. All right, so you can see us later.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.